Live stream Comencio. Let's have a sip of tea to start us off. That's good tea. I'm going to pour a little bit more. I want to refill it immediately. I don't even want to wait a moment before I refill this. Keep it right at the tip of the cup, bordering on meniscus. That's how we like our tea. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friday. We're back here for another episode of the live show. And what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about what's next for the live show and why. I'll talk about some of what I've seen, what I'm noticing, and what I'm going to do based on that. And then I'll also, I'm going to talk about just the process of developing leadership. So kind of two distinct things. The second half will be a little more, what we've, or hopefully you have come to expect from the live show. And then the first half will be more like, yo, what's happening next? So, I've noticed a few things over the years, and I've been doing this format for maybe almost a decade now, which is mind blowing. It's hard for me to believe. Like when I started doing this, I was living in a condo downtown in the city that I live in, and live content was like relatively new. There wasn't a lot of people doing that. It was new, and it was like kind of exciting, and there would be a lot of like serendipitous viewing of content. And I think what I've witnessed happen is a couple things. One is that like we've lost a lot of interest in that. There's just sort of like, yeah, one more live content, live piece of video, who cares? I don't have the interest for that. We've seen the rise of what we could call like shorts. So that would be like, what you tend to see on TikTok, what you tend to see on where else is it? Instagram, that sort of stuff, like fast minute and a half tops content. Like give me the goods in that amount of time. And so there's like a flattening of people's attention span, a minimizing of their attention span. And consequently, like live content like this is live, long form content, I should say, like this, like the live show, is not so appealing to people anymore. It's lost a lot of its appeal. And so I've been watching this for a while, and I've noticed like what shows up for me on Fridays. Because in the early days, maybe the first 4, even like the first 7 years or so, we'd see like a nice sharp spike of viewers. We'd have about 20 people watching at any one given time, which was pretty exciting. It was pretty cool. And it was really neat to be in a dialogue with 20 different people. And we'd have a lot of comments on the side, a lot of like engagement. And that sort of thing really sources you as someone that holds space, that like speaks like this. As a speaker, the worst thing you can do is speak into a room of people that are just like flat, stony faced. What we want to see expression. We want to see a reaction. We want to see like, is what I'm saying having some kind of impact, whether positive or negative? At least with negative, I can ask about that, and then we can build from that. And that's, as humans, we require that. We require feedback, responses, because that way the energy doesn't just stay stuck here with me trying to generate something. It moves back into the audience, and then it comes back. Hey, David, it's nice to have you here. And so as time has gone on, I've noticed that that's diminished. At this point, these days lately, a high amount of audience, like I see 6 right now, that's towards the higher end. Usually that it tends to peak at that, and I'm like, yay, 6 people. And then we go back down to about 2 or 3. And so as a content creator, that is, it creates less inspiration. It makes it less inspiring to do this. And I've noticed that in myself. I've noticed as the years have gone on, like, do I really want to do a Facebook Live today? Am I really interested in that? And for the most part, because I'm really committed to this conversation, the transformational conversation, the conversation about leadership, I've really made a point of like continuing to put this stuff out there. Nevertheless, so that commitment to something greater has really supported me to continue to create, even though the viewership's been quite low. And David's asking, how many views do I get after the live? How many people watch the replay? I'm not actually sure. I don't really scout the numbers too heavily. I could check. I'm not sure. I don't think it's too high though. Like maybe topping out at 100. And maybe I see on a good week 2 comments after the fact. So it's low. So I've been noticing that happening, and that's been having an effect. It has just a natural sort of like it means that in order to generate the inspiration that I'm committed to having in my life about the stuff I do, I have to do more generation. It's less just available and it's more I have to create it from within. And the nature of leadership is that we're always creating and generating inspiration. And there's some times when it really serves to take a look and be like, is this where I want, given that this is requiring a lot of generation? So I don't have to be at the effect, I could be like, hey, I can, if I'm really committed to this, I can generate the inspiration to keep doing so. And I've done so for, the last 3, maybe 4 years as things have started to become less dynamic, we could say. So I've really been created to that or committed to that. But as time goes on, it starts to become worth looking at the question, like, is this the place where I'm really committed to continuing to produce, given it's requiring a lot of generation on my part? Given that it's a lot of me pushing forward and not a lot of it coming back. And there's already plenty of places where I'm doing that, right? Like the podcast, where these end up. The podcast is a lot of work with almost just about nil feedback. Generally speaking, I would say I hear from someone who's listening to my podcast maybe once a year. So I don't really get any feedback other than like this line on my stats that says like, you had 1,000 downloads this month, which is cool. That's cool that I would get 1,000 downloads a month, but there's nothing else to really source it. So that's an area where I'm already doing a lot of generating. And then so to as leader, we develop the muscle, the skill, the capacity, the ability to generate, so that we're not at the effect of the way the world is showing up around us, so that we can be the sole cause of creating what we want to create. But if you're only generating everywhere, like if everywhere you go in your life, you're the one constantly doing all of the generating and there's not a lot coming back, that's an imbalance. And it's really important that we create access to balance. For example, when I'm in a conversation with a client, I don't have to do all the generating. The client's generating stuff. The way the client's showing up is creating inspiration for me. That calls me forward, that has me do more, So that's an example where there's not an imbalance. And it doesn't mean that every place has to be perfectly in balance, because if that was the case, then all that would ever get created in the world is the stuff that people are already inspired about. We would never see stuff like Gandhi supporting the British to leave India, for example. That required a lot of generating to make happen. So it's not that everything should be a balance or anything like that. It's more that when we start to notice these places that are out of balance and start to notice inside a kind of I wonder, it's worth paying attention to that voice. So I've been sitting with that voice. I've been listening to it. And I've also been just witnessing my own relationship to Facebook as a platform in general. So for the longest time, I've really truly had a commitment to not doom scroll. I don't have Facebook on my phone. I don't have the app. I log in through the browser, but I don't want them to be able to track statistics or anything like that on me. And so, but nevertheless, I've witnessed like how does this platform exist for me? And what I found is like it's become over time less and less and less interesting. In the early days, I really made a point of publishing a lot on Facebook, and initially that was just me writing. I'm posting and not getting a lot of feedback. And then as time went on, there'd be more and more engagement, to the point where there was a time where it was really rewarding. It was really rich to share a post and then to have people share their thoughts. Then we'd create dynamic engagement, conversation, that sort of stuff. And then, and then from there, like maybe some people would share the post, whatever, but it was very inspiring. It created a lot of energy for me, and it like inspired me to continue to do more. But I've noticed over the years that started to fade too. And nowadays, like it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter if I post regularly or semi-regularly or not at all. I'll get maybe 1, maybe 2 people that will respond. And so what we're seeing like a diminishing of engagement. We're seeing a diminishing of interest. We're seeing a lot of this stuff start to fall away. And so again, it makes it less inspiring to be here. And so I've been sitting with this for like probably really taking a look over the last 6 months, maybe a year, not wanting to do anything brash, just taking a look and noticing how do I feel about this? What can I distinguish? And here's what I've been able to distinguish about Facebook is that ultimately it's becoming more and more of a dead/dying platform. And if you look around it, you can really see this fact. You know, like when it first started, it was novel and new. And a lot of like the dialogue on it was like with our friends, witnessing what each other were doing, seeing how that was going. And then as time went on, it started to become a little more politicized. It started to have a little more polarization happening. And inevitably, as it always does, capitalism started to like worm its way in. Facebook started to change its algorithm in support of like forcing people towards paying for their content to be seen. So kind of organic viral channels or organic reach stopped being a thing. And as time went on, the stuff that we started to see stopped being the stuff that was of quality. It stopped being the stuff that we wanted to see. It stopped being the stuff that was inspiring for us. And it started to become the stuff that people were willing to pay the most to put in front of us. And so you end up with a lot of kind of distrust ultimately, because it's inherently untrustable. I can't really trust what is being shown to me other than to trust that this person paid the most, like this was the person that was willing to pay the money to put this in front of me. So that started to happen as time went on. And then as time continued, what started to happen is we'd see not only that influx of capitalistic behavior, but hey Monica, not only that influx of capitalistic behavior, but we'd also see like that happening at all of the levels. So it wasn't just happening with the ads that were being put forward to us. It started to happen with the people that were adding you. And all of us, I know you've had this experience too, where you get added, someone initially is like, hey, blah, 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 blah. They kind of pretend to connect with you, and then it's inevitable that they are going to pitch to you. And then you're like, ah. And what do you do as that keeps happening? Eventually you become disillusioned. You become resigned. We stop paying attention to these people. We start being cynical. We get tired of these sort of things. It becomes very like, meh, who cares? Who fucking cares? And so like there was this period of time where initially like a lot of our friend requests were from like randoms, or not randoms, from like our friends. It was super cool. I think all of us enjoyed that. And then it became a lot of our friend requests came from people that were like friends of our friends or in our same group. And we could get into a conversation with them. We could interact with them. And that would still feel pretty good. You could actually build relationship with people. My experience these days is there is none of that available. Or if it is, it's very, very minuscule. Most of us are just too cynical. We're just too tired. We're too overstimulated by Facebook continuing to poke us and be like, no, for real though, pay attention to this one. No, for real, this person didn't pay you money because they paid money for the looks like it didn't pay money tier of getting in front of you. And so there's very little opportunity to build relationship here anymore. And what we're left with is a platform that is now fundamentally like its ethos, we could think of it as, is no longer what it once was. You know, like you could argue with me, but my experience was like the initial ethos of Facebook was like to connect, to build relationship, to provide an opportunity, like a town square, to be with each other, to be in relationship. That's no longer the case. That might be there as a secondary or a tertiary or quadrary, you know, like many, many derivatives back from the primary, but the primary is a vehicle of making money. It's a vehicle of capitalism. And I want to be super clear here that I don't believe capitalism is a bad thing. In fact, I think it's essential. It's like the blood that flows through our veins. We really need that blood. Without that, stuff doesn't happen. Stuff people might argue like, you know, there's lots of arguments for this. One argument being like, well, we should go back to the gold standard because that would change things. Yeah, not really. It wouldn't really, because capitalism is an ontological thing that's happening rather than a surface level whatever thing happening. And so, yeah, we could go back to the gold standard, but then we're going to find new ways to create the same way of being that is underneath, because we're not actually addressing the way of being underneath when we just change our standard. Another thing people will do is they'll be like, well, we should just barter. Yeah, you can do that. But bartering is the same way of being as our current system is. It's just less efficient. So really what we're doing is like, well, let's go back to a less efficient means and then things would be better. Kind of. But the ontology would still be there. It just wouldn't be able to manifest itself as clearly. This is sort of like if you're like, well, what we should do is we should go back to making clothing on looms, and we should go back to like not having cars. Sure, that would be one approach. We could do that, and we wouldn't pollute our environment so well, because what we are doing is we are making our ability to industrialize ourselves less efficient. But that underlying ontology will always be there. And what we need to do is learn to heal or overcome or shift that underlying ontology. So I don't think the answer is like do away with bartering or go back to bartering or do away with the dollar or whatever. Instead, for me, where I see this all being, hey Mariah, nice to have you with us, is simply noticing the places where capitalism has become like the primary driver first and foremost. And that's what's happened on Facebook. Facebook is a place where first and foremost people are there in an attempt in large part to make money rather than to connect, rather than to be in relationship, et cetera, et cetera. And those places are not interesting. Those places have become, I'm sure you felt this on Facebook, it's become lifeless. There's no longer any soul left. So you can peruse, and a few people are sharing, but it's like oases in a desert. They're like not a lot. A lot of it is just like marketing. A lot of it is just like automaticity at this point, just sort of sharing the thing to share because that's always what you've shared. But the connective tissue, the connection of a spirit to another spirit largely isn't really there. At least it's not for me. Maybe you have a different mileage, but I suspect you're probably feeling the same sort of thing that I'm feeling. And so this is the point where, I have to take a look and be like, well, what do I do? Like, do I try to change that whole system? Do I try to be the kind of the voice of dissent, someone willing to do something different? And that's been my aim for as long as I've been doing this. But there also comes a point where it's like, hey, the floor is really tilted here. And at what point do I keep trying to scramble up as opposed to just recognize like, hey, this is no longer the place. This is not the location to keep doing this. So I've been sitting with this over quite an amount of time. And simultaneous to this, David, I saw you write about LinkedIn, so you'll be happy to hear this. That's what I'm doing ultimately. Simultaneous to this, while this has all been going on, I've got a social media team that I work with. And they take my content, they syndicate it out, they coach me. They're like, this is what we need you to do more of if you want people to notice you, or this is what people are like, pay attention to. So I try to, rather than just insist like, no, people should listen to me talk for 2 hours, fuck them. If they don't want to do that, screw them. I can do that, but that's not really my commitment. My commitment is I provide a bridge for people to find their way over to this work so they can get the gift of transformational work. Who do I need to be that bridge? Rather than screw you, here's a bridge, take it or die. And so I listen to them and we put my content in all these different places. And one of the places that seems to have a lot of traction is LinkedIn. And in particular, I put out a newsletter regularly on LinkedIn called Leadership Unleashed, and that has a lot of traction. There's a lot of, I think something like 10,000 followers. I have no idea what that number means. I don't think it's quite the same as Facebook. It might include just all of the 6 billion people that have connected with me on LinkedIn. I'm not totally sure, but that's doesn't really matter. What I notice is that there's more and more people that follow me on there, and that LinkedIn feels like a place where this work, this conversation is of some interest. I'm going to elaborate on that in a little bit, but it's of some interest. Whereas a deep transformational conversation on leadership is not necessarily what people are on Facebook for. People are on Facebook for pictures of other people's cats. We're on Facebook for like funny stories. We're on Facebook for like getting angry about whatever political thing has gotten us angry about and finding other people that will meet us in that anger, either arguing with us about it or partnering with us in it. Oh, I wear glasses now. That's the other thing that's different since I started this live show. I need reading glasses. Monica writes, LinkedIn is more like the learning platform. People are there to learn. So let's talk about what I've noticed with LinkedIn. LinkedIn feels like it's managed to maintain its ethos, its primary ethos, a little bit better than Facebook has. There's one other thing I want to say about Facebook before we move off of that topic, which is like, Facebook was founded on mistrust. The Winklevoss twins had this idea. They went to Mark Zuckerberg. They sought to have him implement the idea to support them to make this thing a reality. And then Mark Zuckerberg took that idea and like went with it and maneuvered them out. So the whole company is founded on this duplicitousness, right out of the gate. So that's a tough thing to kind of, it's sort of like in coaching, the way this shows up is people are like, hey coach, I really want to work with you. Your rate's $10,000, but can you charge me $250? And can you like, let me do this? And can you let me do this? And the clients kind of, they don't realize it, but they're asking the coach to stop being a powerful stand for them before they've even started. We in law, we would call this, boy, I'm bringing all sorts of disciplines into this. In law, we would call this fruit from the poisoned tree. The Facebook began on a it was bred out of distrust, a ground of distrust. And so there's like some inherent distrust baked into that as going to be a bit of a problematic thing. And then on top of that, we can see that, like, you know, there was just a recent security leak that went live. I don't know if you've seen this, but like that Facebook actually used, it snooped on people's Snapchat messages. And the whole premise of Snapchat was security, so that you could put messages out so that they would disappear, so that you wouldn't have to like have people witness your stuff. And here they are snooping on it, right? This is a fundamental breach of trust. And from a place like that, it's very hard for a company to like, it's not a matter of just apologizing. There's a far deeper layer of cleaning up to be done, you know, like a level of ownership that we're not seeing Zuck or any of Facebook as an organization is really capable of handling. So all of that's that. Here's what I noticed about LinkedIn. LinkedIn was founded, as far as I can tell, on the basis of like connecting business, commerce, but also like relationship building, connection through the channels of business, and like Monica said, like a little more opportunity for learning in the scope of business. And so what you have in this place is you have a fuck ton of bullshit. We're not going to step over that. We're going to talk about that metric fuck ton of bullshit in just a moment. You've got that, but you also have a lot of, you have a fundamental premise that in my experience has not been, how can I put this? It has not been subsumed under capitalism. In LinkedIn, sure, there's ads. Certainly there's like commerce being done. There's capitalism live and well, as there has to be, because that is a fundamental part of what it is to be human. We are capitalistic creatures. Even when we are, this is why like when you see leaders try to create communism, it fails because the leader at some level still has a desire to amass wealth for themselves. So that's part of what it is to be human. We can't pretend that's not there. In LinkedIn, what I experience is that capitalism has been embraced in such a way that it is secondary to the primary driver of connection, learning, teaching, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what's happening on LinkedIn. And that has allowed the platform to be much more vibrant because we don't just have capitalism for the sake of capitalism. We have something else that's going on, and then capitalism like nurturing, like the blood flowing to and from that. So that is a much richer place. It's a platform that has a lot more soul to it. Now, the bullshit present in LinkedIn is that like you still have all of human nature present there. And you have human nature as it tends to manifest in a particular context. So in the business context, what is human nature? It tends to be a lot of performance. Like David said, it tends to be a lot of celebrating you got a new position. It tends to have a lot of like my favorite one, which is like a picture of someone at an event saying, super proud I got to be at this event. What's the value for me in that? And it's okay if you're just like, I just want to boast, but most people are kind of doing it because the intention is sort of like, look at the big deal I am, and then maybe you'll hire me to be a big deal for something you're doing, you know, that sort of stuff. That's my experience of it. So all of that is there. It's not any different. And like David has just shared in the comment, like there's not a lot of vulnerability. There's not a lot of like deep, really like potent transformation. There's a lot of people that are successful in business and are giving advice. And they're pretty oblivious to like the actual work there is for them to do. But that's okay. We're not trying to find a platform for where none of that exists, because what is important to recognize is that that thing that we're talking about existing is human nature. That is our humanity. So we can't, oh, my camera's getting a little wobbly. Let's just pause this backup that my computer's doing. Skip, you're donezo. There we go. Back to tight latency. So we're not trying to avoid this bullshit of our humanity. We can't. It's going to be no matter where we go. We're trying to find a platform where capitalism, where there is still soul, where there is still life, where there is still an opportunity to be in relationship with people, and where we haven't just become jaded and cynical and like where there's nothing left but scavengers picking at the corpse of this now bloated dead thing lying on the floor of the ocean. That's an image for you right there. That's what Facebook is to me. That's my experience of it. And I don't think this is something like the platform. It's not a function of like turning a few knobs or something. This is like the ontology of Meta, the ontology of Mark Zuckerberg, the ontology of the company. And so the only way they're going to really be able to like change something, they could release something new, but the ontology remains the same. Just like if who I've learned to be is like kind on the surface but closed internally, and that has burned you in the past, and then I say, hey, I've got this new product, it's called be super open to people and be really kind to them, you're still going to be like, yeah, but Adam, it's not your product, it's the fact of the way you show up. And that's the nature of Facebook. So ultimately what's happening is I'm leaving Facebook behind. It's taken some time to get here. It's provided me a ton. It provided me a lot of like, I generate a lot of business, a lot of like beautiful relationships. I've really gotten to support a ton of people. So I've a deep amount of gratitude for Facebook for what it was. It's simply, whoops, hey, fix yourself, Mike. There we go. It's simply no longer that. And so I'm shifting the live show. We're going to shift it to LinkedIn. I'm going to put most of my attention into LinkedIn. And what I'm aiming to do is to create the possibility on that platform of like breaking through the bullshit, the performance. Now that's a lot of work because people they have the experience all of us have, right? Which is like, ugh, LinkedIn is a lot of performance and bullshit. And it's a lot of cheerleading, which is fine, right? Like going at a boy to someone or at a girl is fine. It doesn't create transformation. And so what is there to do? There's to keep beating the drum, to keep bringing the message, to keep sharing what there is to share, because we know that it makes a difference on some level, and let go of it needing to look a particular way when it's making that difference or when it's not making that difference, to just share the truth, to keep generating there. And so that's what's happening. So the live show will shift after this week to LinkedIn full time is where I'm going to publish it. It'll be 10 a.m. Pacific time, as always on Fridays. And what I think I will probably do is shift from a format more where I discuss a lot of different topics to ones more where I'm discussing a particular topic. So, and often I'll be doing a lot of work on the ontology of stuff. So like some of the things I've got in mind are like to discuss the ontology of anxiety, meaning what is the being, what is the spirit, if you like, of anxiety, of our anxiousness? How does it get put together? What is the energy of it? How does it self-perpetuate? So that we can start to learn going deep into a single concept. What's the ontology of fear? How does this work? What is the ontology of leadership? So I'll be doing a lot of work of looking through that ontological lens to like pull apart with nuance a particular subject / topic. And likewise, I'll be doing that with all kinds of things in leadership. So our shows will tend to be more focused on a particular thing rather than talking about like riffing on a number of different subjects. And it'll probably be a little bit shorter, probably no more than an hour in length is my sense. Of course, all of this is in process, right? Thanks everyone for your comments. It's nice to see you guys showing up. I mean that differently. I mean, it's like really nice to have you present here. I'll definitely check out Peter Ralston. Thanks, David. David's saying you would love the work of Peter Ralston. Please check him out. I will do so. So, and then my hope is that this creates more energy. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. Then I'll look to what's next. And this is how we must grow as leaders. We have to notice what's showing up. And the first thing we have to do is we have to be with it rather than reacting to it. So initially, when I like started to notice like, hey, there's not a lot of viewers. Why is this feeling kind of crappy for me? My reaction would have been like, fuck you guys. Fuck you world. Screw this. I'm just going to quit, or I'm just going to bail on doing this. But instead, I want to like go slow, really allow this to sit in my body to metabolize. And the other version of not reacting would be like, I'm going to push even harder, right? I just want to actually sit very still. I want to be in equanimity with like, okay, this is where things are at. Let's just sit in this so we can get a sense of it. So you can really experience this and feel this. This is really crucial to leadership, as we have to develop the ability to be where we are without needing to change or fix or shift it or anything like that. So we slow down, sit down, I be with this sort of stuff, and I let it sit. And then once I get clear, I take the next step, and then we'll see how things go. You know, I'll start dipping my toe in. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see what happens. If we get any engagement, if not, I'll go to my team. I'll ask them for support with it, and slowly start to build this. This all came to a head as I was sitting in ceremony, as a matter of fact. And I've been experiencing this for like being in the feeling this out for about 1 year and 6 months. When I was sitting in ceremony, I was releasing a bunch of fear that I brought down with me, brought down to Costa Rica. And the fear was like, I'm not enough, I'm falling behind, you know, very, very typical, boring, common fear. And I was just letting that fear sit. In fact, what I was doing was feeling it. Where do I feel this in my body? It feels like a cold flush up through kind of my legs, up through my stomach. Almost like my body, I don't feel my body so much. I just feel this sheen of cold, almost like a cold sweat. I'm just feeling that and letting it be. And like, oh my God, my practice is going to fall away. You can hear me doing a little bit of an impersonation in the voice because I'm shy about sharing this. That's what's going on there. Instead, just feeling like, I'm going to lose all my business. This is going to happen. You know, all of the things that fear sort of knows to do to hook me, to grab me by the amygdala and then pull me along. And so instead, I just like, all right, yeah, I see you, buddy. I can feel that. Can I feel the fear of that? Can I allow myself to simply be afraid? And in allowing myself to simply be afraid, what started to happen was instead of like needing to move, instead of needing to shut down, to close so I didn't have to feel that way, or instead of needing to like get into a bunch of action so then that fear would be resolved, instead, eventually the fear started to get bored and be like, this guy's boring, and move on. And then from there, I could start to see this with like some real clarity. It's not to say that all I had to do was go and sit in ceremony and drink some plant medicine and blah, blah, blah. That clarity I've been building for 1 year. I'm just speaking to like the moment that this really started to like shift for me was the moment, or like this fulcrum moment, I guess we could call it, this inflection point, was where I really just let myself be with that fear. And as you let yourself sit in your fear, what starts to happen is like, it's almost like fog starting to part. And you start to be like, oh, this is where I am. This is what's going on. Okay, cool. Can be with this. Don't have to change any of this. So that's been the process that's arrived to here. So probably starting next week, I mean, all of this is in flux, but probably starting next week, I'm going to start to publish to LinkedIn, first of all. Of course, we'll grab that video and put it out to YouTube. Of course, we'll grab that video and we'll syndicate it onto the podcast. So if those are the ways you catch this conversation, great, you're still there. And if you're like, man, well, I hope he keeps doing this, one great way you can support me with that is send me a message and let me know you hope I keep doing this. Those of you here in the comments, you're already doing that. So thank you so much for being here and for your support that way. So let's just check and see if there's anything more I want to speak to on this. Yeah, Monica's writing also Twitter. We put this stuff on Twitter. I find Twitter tough, Monica, because my experience is to really make use of Twitter, you have to be somewhat immersed in it. It's not a thing you can dip your toe into. You might be talking about something else. I'll finish this thought before we come to what you're talking about StreamYard, and then I might ask you about that. But with Twitter, my experience has been like it's an ongoing dialogue. It's not sort of like a drop a set of thoughts and then people will ruminate and talk about it and then you come back to it later. It's more like in the moment. That's part of the magic of Twitter. But generally speaking, I don't love spending a lot of time on my phone. I'm very fortunate to be a Xennial or an Oregon Trail generation is what they call us. We're the people that we came of age as the internet was becoming ubiquitous, but before it was. So we understand the internet, we're able to navigate it very well, but it's not, we kind of grew up where it wasn't all pervasive. We're not fully of it. Whereas millennials are fully of the internet. They came of age as the internet was all around them already. And so for people like me, we still have this desire not to be on our phone as much. I think all of us want that, but it's easier for people like me because I didn't grow up with a phone. I didn't have a phone until I was like 22, something like that, which is crazy by today's standards. And so the ever present conversation on Twitter, I have to put energy in to like get myself there to do that. And it's just not energy that I find that interesting. I'm often like, fuck it. I'd rather play this game over here. I'd rather practice drumming, or I just got a hi-hat as an aside over here. Let me see if I can show you. Come on, show them the hi. Oh, you can just barely kind of, it's that little brass thing next to my cajon and my snare stand. It creates one hell of a racket right now. We're going to get better at it. It'll be cool. Anyhow, so Twitter is challenging for me because it's just not natural. It's not the natural way that I tend to engage with the internet and audiences. I'd like to know more about StreamYard. Like, I have a hard time imagining people would want an hour and a half long form content streamed to Twitter, that people would watch that, but maybe. And so I'll check in with you about that, Monica. I'd like to hear more. And Brenda, you're writing, we'll watch/listen when I can on Facebook. And if you move off to LinkedIn, we'll shift over there to continue taking it. Oh, that's lovely. It's lovely to hear from you, Brenda. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, LinkedIn, the podcast is often really good. If you're like me, I tend to consume a lot of content when I'm doing busy work. So when I'm folding laundry, when I'm driving, when I'm out for a walk in the beautiful weather here, I get a podcast going. It's a really rich way for me to experience, to receive content. Okay. Just going to check and see if there's anything more to share on this, and then we'll go to our topic today about developing leadership. I'm going to pour some tea as well. Oh, yeah. Cool. Okay, let's talk about developing leadership. So that's such a broad concept, right? Developing leadership. Brother, what are you talking about? What are we going to do? Hey, Tommy, nice to hear from you. And I'm really touched to hear you'll follow to LinkedIn. Thanks. That's good to hear. It's nice to have you with us. You've been with me for a long while, and I'm really appreciative of your energy, your heart, and your presence. You make a difference to me. So thank you. So I want to talk about developing leadership in like some, we're going to peel the onion a bit. So I'm going to talk about, like, what does it even mean to develop leadership? What does that practice look like? Why is it challenging? How does the world tend to try to meet it? That's the sort of stuff we'll talk about. So when we begin with this concept of developing leadership, the first thing that's important to recognize is everyone loves the concept of having their leadership developed. The thought, the idea of having your leadership developed is very rich and everyone wants it. Why wouldn't you? It'd be if I was like, hey, do you want to have like 6-pack abs and look jacked? Do you want to be really like, do you want to have like a great body? Everyone wants that. All of us do. We're all obsessed with that these days. There's very few people that are like, no, I want to be at risk for diabetes. Thank you very much. Usually when people say no, what they're really saying no to is what it's going to require of them. And that's the thing we don't understand. That's really what's at play. We say we love the concept of leadership. We love the concept of having 6-pack abs, but it's going to require that I don't eat cake. And I love cake. And having our leadership develop requires a lot of like challenging work that once we meet it, once we come into confrontation with it, that concept of becoming a leader becomes much less appealing. We don't really like that. So that's an important starting point whenever you're deciding you might be someone that wants to develop someone's leadership or that wants to have your leadership developed. It's really important that we recognize that truth. Everyone will say yes to it initially. Pretty much everyone, notwithstanding that it might cost them something they're not willing to pay or whatever. But the idea of it, everyone's a yes to. And the practice of it, very few people are. Because leadership really costs something. It's not free. There is a payment we must make. The second thing I want to speak to is that we hold this concept of leadership like an external, like a concept out there, like it's something I can just teach you. And consequent to that, most of the training out there is about you being taught about the fundamentals and the premises of leadership. Like, a good leader does X, Y, and Z. And in order to lead people in this situation, do A, B, and C. Excuse me. That's not really how leadership is developed. You can't really develop leadership in a vacuum. Develop leadership, we have to have you leading something so that then we can provide you feedback on it. Think of it like riding a bike. I can take you into the classroom and I can teach you all about the fundamentals of physics. I can teach you about the premise and the physics behind a gyroscope and how it keeps you balanced and right, like upright. We can teach you all of that stuff, but we will at best be getting you like 10% of the way towards what it requires to ride a bike. At best, we will be getting you 10% of the way towards what it requires to be a leader. And if you have a part of you that loves the concept of becoming a leader, but are very frightened or scared or resistant to the scarier stuff, the stuff that it's going to actually require, then that 10% will be very seductive because it'll allow you to be moving like closer to what you want without actually having to do the scary thing. So like in this metaphor of riding a bike, in the world, we have a lot of people who are very, very obsessed with learning about riding bikes. They read about bikes. They look at photos of people riding bikes. They learn about the gyroscopic principle. They become fascinated by that. They buy gyroscopes. They run gyroscopes back and forth along a piece of string. They do all of this sort of stuff because it feels kind of good because it's kind of moving them towards riding a bike. But it's not actually getting them on that bike. And so in order to support someone in developing their leadership, in order to really develop someone's leadership, we have to have them practicing leading something. And this becomes really challenging in the development of leadership. In the Forge, the way we do this is people pay money to join us, to be a part of this, to have their leadership developed. And then we have them practicing leadership at various levels, various ways of doing it. So some of the ways we can practice leadership seem kind of mundane. It can be like, you have a requirement. Now that you're joining the leadership team, the requirement is you be here on these calls and you be here on time. And what happens is people then be human and they don't be here on time. They show up late. They have an excuse. They have a good reason for missing a call. And of course, we're human and life is going to happen. So leadership is never about just always doing something constantly. But as life happens, our job as leaders is to then be responsible for the impact of that. If I said I was going to do something and now I'm not able to, my job is to be responsible so that I minimize the impact to those of you that are relying on me. If I told you I was going to be here leading this 1,000-person march that we're all going to go to, and on the day in question, I get sick, or my nephew needs me for some reason, or my father gets sick and I have to go to the hospital, or, then I've got to do some stuff as a leader to minimize that impact. Alternatively, I can just send out a broadcast tweet, hey, dad got sick, can't go, sorry. Hope to see you next time. But that's going to have a big impact. And so in this instance where I'm the one leading 1,000 people, it's really easy to see like, well, of course you got to do that thing, Adam, because you're at the head of the thing. But what happens is we don't realize the impact we have no matter where we are. If you're on a team of 10 leaders and you decide not to show up, that has an impact. And what happens, because we're humans, is we don't want to hear about that impact. We don't want to hear about it because it lands on us like, here's how you fucked up. It's not at all that, but that's how you create it. What's happening is we're trying to help you see the impact you have so that next time you can get out in front of it. You can do something different. And the reason we want to help you see that is because then wherever else you practice leadership, you become someone that people are more willing to rely on, more willing to trust, more willing to be a yes to, because they know even if Adam doesn't come through and do this, I know that he's going to make sure he's going to do everything in his power to leave me whole and complete. So I'm willing to trust this guy. So what happens is we end up on these teams, 10 of us, for example, and we decide I'm not going to be there, blah, blah, blah. And at this early stage of practice, what we tend to do is just like, so I'm really sorry, please let me know if there's anything I need to clean up. So that's like the first level. And it's sort of like what we're asking people to do is like, look, I imagine that if I drop this glass of milk on the kitchen table or on the floor, it's going to have an impact. I'm sorry about that. Let me know if there's anything you need me to do. So it's better than nothing, but it's lazy. It's kind of, I'm dropping this milk. It's already going to create a mess and inconvenience you. And now I'm asking you to do even more work. Hey, in addition to cleaning up this milk that I'm not going to clean up, can you also let me know if there's something you need? And as a leader, our job is to become better and better and better at getting out in front of that and anticipating, hey, I imagine one, this is going to create a big mess. So I'm going to clean that up. Two, I probably broke your glass. So I'm going to get you a new glass. Three, I imagine you're probably upset with me about this. And so I want to create some space. I'm going to create some time in my schedule so I can sit and I can really understand that upset. That's a lot of stuff to do, right? But that's what it means to be a leader that is really powerful and trustable. Because the higher up we go into the rows, the ranks, the levels of leadership, the greater the impact that we have when we don't honor our word. And so the more we have to be able to hold the capacity to hear that impact, and the more we have to be able to get out in front of it. So this is, I'm intending to give you like a little bit of like some insight into how leadership is developed in a very particular, like looking very specifically at one kind of instance where we can start to do this work. Now, here's what happens on your side if you're the person that like made the mess, so to speak. And by mess, I just mean had an impact other than the one we're intending in the space. So what tends to happen is you feel defensive. You feel like, hey, I'm doing my best. That's a big one we have. I'm doing my best. What the fuck? Why do I have to sit here and listen to this? You don't. That's the first thing. You don't have to sit here and listen to this. This is totally not something you have to do. But you chose to be here because you said you wanted your leadership developed. And that's a challenging place for people to choose back into, because we hear feedback through the lens of here's how you fucked up. And when we hear here's how you fucked up, we get defensive and we make the person saying that wrong. And we also tend to point to how they're fucking up. Well, here's how you're fucking up. And so it becomes very challenging for us to receive this kind of feedback. Really, really tough to let it in, really, really tough to work ourselves out, really, really tough to get to a place of us being responsible. Hey, this feedback's only coming to me because I made that mess in the first place. That's hard for us to get on board with. And so what we do is we fight it, and we be belligerent, and we be kind of churlish, like childish, really. And that's okay, because that's the only way we can grow is for us to move through our process. And as that's happening, there's something else happening on the other side of leadership, the person who's developing your leadership. And what's going on there is they are working really hard not to take the way you're showing up personally. Our job as someone developing leadership is to recognize like, hey, this is essential for this person to move through this. There's nothing they could be doing differently. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't reflect to them. It doesn't mean that I don't hold their feet to the fire. It doesn't mean that I don't point to what's happening. But as I'm doing all of that, who I'm being is holding that this is perfect exactly where they are. As opposed to, I'm going to point to this stuff you're doing, but who I'm being is that you're fucking up and stop doing it, stupid. That's going to be a different kind of energy that's going to come through. And thus the feedback I'm providing you as a leader is going to land much differently. It's going to have a totally different effect. And so on this side of the table, leadership is very demanding. It's demanding in a way that we are completely unaware of, because the leader developing someone's leadership is constantly generating. They're generating not taking something personally. They're generating opening their heart in the face of a really good reason to close it. This person's being a dick. Yep, that's their process. Can we open our heart back up? And can we love them? And can we lovingly remind them they chose this? That's the only reason we're having this conversation. And can we keep putting this in front of them? And so both of these have to be present for leadership to transform, to develop. More often than not, you have leaders that can't hold any of this. They're oblivious to it. They haven't had someone stand for them this way, and thus they can't hold it. And then more often what happens is they're going through this process. They have a bad leader kind of leading for them. They conclude, fuck this. And then they choose out. And then they decide, I'm never going to lead that way. And then they go into the world and they lead as a reaction to what didn't work, and which is just more of the same. So we don't have a lot of models for really potent leadership. Standing for people this way will like use up a lot of your resources. And so it's really important that leaders recognize like their need for resourcing, their need for people they can go and talk to and really like be affirmed, be reminded of who they are, be acknowledged for the good work that they're doing. And it's part of why it's really important to develop a team of leaders that can sort of support you in this. So now what I want to do is I want to talk to another form of leadership that needs to happen while this is going on. Monica's saying, I'm imagining a network of coaches who educate people on transformation and ontology on LinkedIn. I like that idea. I'm going to sit with that. I'm going to think about that a little bit more. That's a cool idea. Good concept. I think there's an opportunity to bring more ontology into LinkedIn, into the world, frankly, but certainly in LinkedIn. So I've just described someone developing someone else's leadership, and I've described, so we could call them the leader and the leadee, the person who's stepping into leadership, who's having this practice. I want to talk about a third role that's going on in this, which is co-leaders. So you've got the top person developing the leadership, you've got the person whose leadership's being developed, and then you've got his peers. Let's say A is the leader, B is the leadee, and then C, D, E, F, G are the peers. They're the other people who are also having their leadership developed by that person at the top, but in a different way, maybe not exactly the same thing happening in the moment. So B, we'll call him Reggie. That's easier. Reggie is the one whose leadership's being developed. When Reggie is confronted this way and is in the fuck me, fuck you, why am I even here? I didn't sign up for this. This is work. I hate this. This sucks. This isn't fun. All of the stuff he's doing in resistance to stepping into his level of leadership, in resistance to him taking full responsibility for how everything happening right now is a function of his leadership and him creating it or her creating it. In those moments, what Reggie is naturally going to do is he is going to seek affirmation for what he is feeling from those around him. You could think of this like how a person drowning in the water, if you come to save them, they are going to do everything in their power to just clamber up above you. So they don't care if you drown yourself. They are just, all they can think about, I got to get my head above water. In life-saving courses, one of the things they teach is rescuing or saving yourself from the clutches of the drowning. That's a very, very important part of life-saving. So our peers have a different kind of job. Reggie is going to seek collusion from them. So when Reggie is in the throes of having his leadership developed, he's not going to be able to see the opportunity for himself. What he's going to see is how you suck. You are being a jerk. You are not listening to them. You are not. And this is essential for Reggie to be here. Absolutely essential, because Reggie is moving from a place where his purview is entirely on himself to purview where he can be responsible for a greater amount. He can be responsible for his impact in the space and the effect he's having on other people rather than just on how he feels. That is not an easy path to walk. That's a breakthrough path. And to get through a breakthrough, we have to have a breakdown first. So as Reggie is moving through that, there's going to be a point where he's in absolute resistance to this idea. And from that resistance, he's going to be like the drowning. He is going to grab a hold of his peers and he's going to be like, isn't this person the worst? Isn't this person sucky? Doesn't this person blah, blah, blah. Adam's a terrible leader. He's a jerk. Blah, blah, blah. The peers are going to feel a strong desire to collude with Reggie for a bunch of reasons. One, because we're way better trained at being nice with people rather than being leaders with them. We are better suited and more comfortable being their friend than we are their co-leader. And so what do we do as friends? We collude and we agree. Yeah, that person is a dick. Yeah, that girlfriend you broke up with did suck. Yeah, that husband of yours was a dickhead. Whatever. And so that's our first thing. And when you do that, it adds gravity to Reggie's energy of resistance. It has him double down on it. Yeah. Veronica agrees with me. Adam is a dickwad. Yeah, this isn't my stuff. This is Adam's stuff. And so then Reggie doubles down on it. This is super, super common and compelling. We call this collusion in leadership. And one of the things we are always seeking to train in our leadership teams is the ability for them to stand with the leader, to stand with me, or to stand with you, or whoever it is, to stand with the leader in these situations rather than colluding. Because what that does is it stops leaving the leader at the top as the only one holding this energy for Reggie. What it does is it creates this opportunity for Reggie to kind of not have an escape route, but other than to confront what is in front of him. Very few containers like this exist. It's very rare. It requires a lot of commitment and dedication and energy on the part of the leaders to create this, because holding this at first means you are holding this by yourself. as you develop team members that can then start to hold this energy with you. And when we're developing people like this, they have really good reasons for why not stand with Reggie this way. They're like, well, honestly, I'm tired. I'm spent. Honestly, I just get lost in everything Reggie throws up. Honestly, I just don't want to have to go to bat with Reggie's like angry energy. And all of that's totally fine, right? It makes sense. When we're the one at the top, we're like, fuck yeah, me neither. It sucks. But that's the work of leadership. And so as people move through these phases, what starts to happen is initially they are merely distinguishing, here's what's in the way. Here's why I'm not doing it. But the practice of leadership is us stepping beyond why we're not doing it to like doing it. So they start to develop this ability. Here's why I'm not doing it. And here's what I see to put in. And here's what I'm going to take on to not have that stop me, because I'm committed to being able to lead someone powerfully. And as people kind of confront this and start to like face this stuff, they start to realize like, hey, maybe I don't want to do this. This is hard work. Leadership is some of the most hard work. It's like akin to parenting, except you don't have the biological imperative to help you along. You know, with biological imperative, you have your parent, your kid, you'll do anything for that kid. You're chemically and biologically trained to do that. Leadership, you don't get that. You don't have that option. You're simply doing it because you said you would, because you chose to stand for this person this particular way. And like a parent, it can be very, very thankless. It's a lot of like being made a villain whilst you are heroically standing for someone's greatness, and just being willing to do that and to work yourself out and have your heart broken. So this is kind of like my intention in sharing this, is to help people see like a little bit behind the scenes, in the hopes that next time someone is standing for you in your leadership, or that you are practicing with someone, start to see the places where you drop them, where you're like, I just don't have the energy. That's okay. But then it's important for you to own like, hey, this is a place where I'm abdicating from my leadership. And then, maybe there's a mess you got to clean up. You might have to be responsible for that choice. Or help people see when they're on the side of Reggie, like, oh, wow, maybe there's a bigger picture that I'm just not able to see yet. And like really getting ourselves acquainted with this is crucial along the path to leadership. And as we walk this path, the ultimate aim, like you're going to go through these things. Every time someone joins my leadership team, Bay and I's leadership team, we tell them, hey, there's going to be a point where you want to quit, probably a bunch. There's going to be a point where you decide that we're wrong, and you're going to seek collusion of it. We lay this all out up front. We have documents that we give them to read, like stuff from philosophers like Werner Erhard, like founders of ontology, all this sort of stuff. They read it and they're like, this is really good. And we get to this moment and none of it's all gone, because in the moment you're hijacked and you can't see this. All we can really do is point to it as much as possible leading up to it, so that when you get caught in the throes of it in the moment, you are able to catch it just a little bit sooner. But the most important thing here is to recognize you don't have to catch it sooner. It's okay wherever you are in your process. So that's kind of like, that's some mishmash of thoughts on leadership. I'm going to like take these, I'm going to sanitize these, I'm going to like create something a little more specific, and then we'll start to bring that to LinkedIn. That's going to be the plan going forward. So have a sip of tea to finish up here. Our final sip of tea on Facebook. I want to finish by saying like a big thank you to everyone that's hung out over all of these years, 9 years. I really cut my teeth doing lives, presenting in this format, and it's been a blast. I've really loved just getting to like be in conversation with people. I've been really honored that people would come and hang out with me, drink tea Friday morning. I mean, to me, it seems like a super cool, fun way to start to close down our week, but really honored. And I hope to see people come across to LinkedIn. I hope to be with you there and like continue to build the momentum that is flagged a little bit as of late, but that has been started, and to really continue to bring like ontology and the work of transformational leadership to more and more people. So hope to see you soon. Thanks for all the good times. Thanks for hanging out. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.